a newly discovered release entitled Metaphysics, the Lost Atlantic album, Hassan Ibn Ali with Odin Pope on the tenor sax, Art Davis again on bass, and Khalil Mahdi on drums. And we have some gentlemen responsible to getting this recording out on the line right now. Lewis Porter, my friend of many years, biographer of John Coltrane, and Alan Sukoenig, who did the notes for the original album and knew Hassan, and he's on the line also, hopefully. We got you both on the line. Gentlemen.
Great to talk to you as always.
Okay, so we got you both going here. Wow, this is an incredible discovery. I've been playing the Max Roach Trio featuring the legendary Hassan for about 55 years now, and
That's great.
Really intrigued by this pianist who other folks talked about, including the Odin Pope, who I got to know very well over the years. He was with Max Roach and bringing his saxophone choir to D.C., but this is a real treasure.
Right.
And I guess I want to ask Alan, because you knew him and you wrote the notes for the original album. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, Hassan was a very warm person, easy to get to know. At least that was my experience. I didn't know him extremely well. There were many people who knew him better than I did and longer than I did. I knew him for a period of about 3.5 years or something like that. How I got to meet him is a kind of a funny story. Would you like to hear it?
Sure, absolutely.
Well, I was an undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I had a friend, another student there, named Dave Schreier, who was a superb tenor saxophonist. And Dave used to sit in around town frequently. One day in the winter of 1962, I ran into him, and he was very excited. He told me with great enthusiasm that he had heard a pianist who sounded like a logical extension of Thelonious Monk with technique like Bud Powell.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what I said too. And I was eager to hear him, but the next thing I knew, Dave told me that Hassan was in prison. Wow. He was a drug user, and he was often being arrested. This was before the Rockefeller drug laws, so the sentences were shorter. He was in and out many times. I don't know how many times. So that was discouraging. I couldn't really hear him if he was in prison. And then one day I think it was in April, in the spring of that year, 62, I was practicing long tones on my tenor saxophonist. I should state that I'm not a musician and never have been, but I did play instruments as a young person. So I was practicing long tones in a small room on the third floor of the Student Union building, which is called Houston Hall, when suddenly I heard the sounds of a piano filtering through the air vent that was on the wall down near the floor, and I could hear the piano quite well. And I said to myself, "My God, I know Hassan is in prison, but from what I'm hearing and from what Dave told me, that's got to be Hassan."
Wow!
And I packed up my horn and I ran down the steps to the second floor. And I found, sure enough, there were Hassan and Dave Schreier playing at the piano. I mean, Hassan was at the piano. Dave had a tape recorder there, I think. And that's how we met. Dave introduced us. Hit it off right away.
Wow, what a remarkable coincidence!
Yeah, it's a great story.
Wow, it really is. Now, how did you come to write the liner notes for the release that Max Roach put out?
Well, it went something like this. I think by that time I was in New York, living in New York after I finished it at Penn, and Hassan told me that he had just made this record, and I wanted to. I was eager to get the assignment. And there was no reason why I should have it, because I had no experience whatsoever. I wasn't a musicologist or a musician, nothing like that, or a writer. But I liked the idea. So I wrote a little article very quickly about Hassan, just for the purpose of showing it to the people at Atlantic, and it did the trick. And I remember they said, I don't remember who told me this, but whoever it was said, "Well, you seem to be the only one around who knows anything about him."
Oh, wow. Jeez.
That's how I got the job.
Wow, it's fantastic. Well, it was very insightful, to say the least.
And it's kind of amazing to think that the same person who did these notes 56 years ago, or whatever it was, 57 years, also did the notes for the new release. Talk about continuity.
Absolutely. No, it's wonderful. Folks, you're listening to Thursday Late Night Jazz. I'm Rusty Hassan. My guests tonight are Alan Sukoenig and Louis Porter, and we're talking about the new release of Hassan Ibn Ali, who we featured earlier, the original recording that he put out in the mid-'60s. It was under Max Roach's name, his leadership, the Max Roach Trio, featuring the legendary Hassan. And he did a second recording with Odean Pope. It was Odean's first session to perform. And it was the beginning of a long association with Max Roach. No, it wasn't. Max ain't on this, I'm saying, but he had a long association with Max. But this album was never released. Tell us how it was discovered to be put out. Either Louis or Alan, either one of you can give that story.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I had contacted Alan because of part of his friendship with Hassan was that he and his friend Dave Schreier made some tapes of Hassan playing solo piano for them. And I said, wow, you should do something with those tapes. This was an email, and Alan wrote me back. And he said, I really am interested in doing something with the tapes, but while we're at it, do you think there's any chance that quartet session still exists? And so I have to give Alan credit, because I might not have thought of pursuing that, but over the years, I've worn so many hats. As you know, I'm a player, I'm a teacher, I'm an author, but I've also been kind of consultant to all kinds of different musical projects, and some of them have been record releases. So I said, why don't we contact my friend Patrick Milligan, who last time I worked with him, he was at Rhino, which owns Atlantic. And within a couple of hours, Patrick said, you know what, that is listed in our database, so that means we must have it somewhere. And of course, both Alan and my heads exploded. We said, what? I thought this was totally destroyed, but it turns out that, what happens, the same thing happened when I was working on the box set of the complete Atlantic recordings of Coltrane, is it turns out that before the fire, a producer had been going through stuff and said, hey, would you make me a copy of the tape? Because, as you know, Rusty, master tapes in those days were 2 inches wide. You could not possibly play them at home.
No.
And so they would make a dub for a producer and so that they could listen at home. And apparently someone had done that with this session, and just really was crazy luck,
So it was not destroyed in the fire that lost a lot of Atlantic recordings and other material.
What happened is these backups were in a separate location.
Wow.
So the original 2-inch tapes are gone. And that same thing happened for the Atlantic, but the backups were somewhere else, and they did not get destroyed. So once in a blue moon, there is a backup that still survives.
Now, Louis, when you were doing your Coltrane biography and covering the Philadelphia area, what impact did Hassan have in the Philadelphia scene? Did he come up? I know he certainly had an influence on younger musicians like Odean Pope, but what was the interaction with the other musicians?
Absolutely, he did come up, and one of the things that a grad student of mine found in the newspaper was an advertisement in 1949 for a quartet. Get this, the Philly Joe Jones Quartet with Percy Heath on bass, William Langford, which is Hassan's birth name, on the piano, and John Coltrane on the saxophone.
Wow, okay.
So not only did they know each other, but they worked together.
Wow,
and in fact, my friend Dan Morgenstern told me that so that's 49. Dan told me that he once heard a tape of Hassan jamming with Bill Barron and Coltrane. It was a short tape. It was about 15 minutes, and unfortunately, we did all the legwork and found that the tape no longer exists. But Dan is very reliable, so that shows that Bill Barron was also part of that circle, and all this is before Odin got involved. So I think it's clear that a lot of people, including Coltrane, were seriously interested in what Hassan had to offer.
Well, let's talk a little bit about his approach musically and what he does on this particular recording, Metaphysics.
I love that. Well, by the way, you picked a great one. I love that, his solo on that when you played. And one thing that I love about it is he tinkles way up high in the upper register of the piano. It's a great effect. It creates a lot of excitement. Not too many players do that. One person who did it beautifully on his famous solo Matrix was our late idol, Chick Corea. He was brilliant at playing up in the upper register there. And it's interesting because he mentioned, Alan, you mentioned that Dave said he's an extension of Bud Powell. But
an extension of Monk with technique like Bud Powell.
Oh, he's extension of Monk, but with Bud's technique.
Wow.
And I think all of that is very clear, and yet the combination is a very coherent whole. He really does have his own thing going. Let's
hear one of the shorter pieces. We'll do Epitome and then talk some more afterwards, and then conclude with another piece from the album. So let's do this piece again. This features Odin Pope on the tenor sax, Art Davis on bass, and Khalil Mahdi on drums, and then we'll talk about the musicians also when we come back. Epitome from Metaphysics. You listen to Thursday Late Night Jazz. I'm Rusty Hassan, and Metaphysics is a brand new release coming out officially tomorrow by Hassan Ibn Ali, and it features Odin Pope on tenor sax, Art Davis bass, and Khalil Mahdi on drums. Recorded back in 1965, but just available now. We have two gentlemen responsible for this release coming out now, Alan Sukoenig and Louis Porter. Gentlemen, this is just incredible.
It is amazing. And in fact, we'll give Alan the credit for the title of the album. You want to tell him, Alan, how because the album was, because it was unreleased, it was left untitled. You want to tell him how you chose, why you suggested Metaphysics?
Actually, it was Patrick who titled it, not me. But what happened was Patrick told us that his first choice for a title for the album was Epitome, which was the title of the tune you just heard.
Right.
But he rejected it for the following reason. Back a few years ago, it was believed that Odin Pope wrote Epitome. In fact, Odin Pope did not write Epitome. He wrote another tune called Epitome, which has no relation to this one.
Okay.
He wrote it many years later.
Uh-huh.
But Patrick, who's already been mentioned, Patrick was under the impression that this was Odin's tune, so he had to pick a second choice, and his second choice was Metaphysics, which is also one of the tunes on the record.
Absolutely.
And the reason Louis thought that it was my doing is that I did get involved by suggesting to Patrick that Metaphysics, in fact, is a better title because Epitome, because of its spelling, people who don't know don't know the word,
epitome,
are going to call it epitome.
Epitome. Right.
Metaphysics is a longer word. But
absolutely, no, indeed, it's Metaphysics. Good title. Now, Alan, you became friends with Hassan. Tell us about your relationship with him and the circumstances that sidetracked his career.
Well, excuse me. From what I can make out, what sidetracked his career was his drug use, resulting in frequent prison terms. Many musicians use drugs, but being in prison frequently is not helpful. That's one thing. And another thing is that his playing was really off-putting to many musicians. According to Odin Pope, at the Woodbine Club, which was an after-hours club, when Hassan would take the stage, the various horn players would sit down. They couldn't play with him. I guess it had to do with his harmonic devices and perhaps something to do with his rhythmic structure. I don't know. I wasn't there. That didn't help, and also he was a very eccentric person. I didn't find his eccentricities in any way off-putting. He had a great sense of humor, but it was a sense of humor that maybe many people didn't get or didn't appreciate. And then finally, he had a strange behavior of pushing. If he'd be in a club and somebody else would be playing the piano, and he didn't think they were making it, he would push the pianist off the bench and take over himself.
Oh, Lord. Wow. It just flashed through, in terms of what, the drug epidemic and what it did to so many musicians and how people could have dealt with it differently. My late friend Jimmy Heath, for example, was incarcerated. And
that's right.
And came out, and what a career that he had, in terms of, taking over his life afterwards, and handling it. Whereas the tragedy of Hassan's life in terms of other aspects, and you also think of Bud Powell, in terms of the difficulties that he had, but continued to play, and how the opportunity to record or whatever else propped him up for a while. Bud Powell continued, whereas Hassan just drifted away from the piano even. And I noticed in the notes that he's not late in his life playing well at all.
Not playing well?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, what happened was, Odin told me many years ago that Hassan had a stroke.
Ah, okay.
And when Odin went to visit him, in the facility where he was, and he said that Odin said that Hassan was the youngest person there. There was a piano, and he said Hassan was sort of banging on the piano like a child who doesn't know how to play.
Wow!
Because of the stroke.
Well,
very sad.
It really
very
is
sad.
in terms, but now his name will be better recognized. I noticed that the publicity is always already coming out, reviewed on Fresh Air.
Oh my God, the response has been
is
absolutely ecstatic. It's been all over the place, and everybody's all the reviews are incredibly positive, and in fact so positive that we're already talking about. I'm going to leak a little something here because I'd like to see a buzz stop, but we're already talking about those private tapes of Hassan playing solo that Alan and his late friend Dave Schreier made, and thinking about possibly getting some of that out to the public. So thanks to our craziness, people may get to know Hassan a lot better than they do now.
Absolutely. You know? So the legendary will indeed become a legend. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for calling in tonight. I want to leave some time before the top of the hour to play True Train. So,
beautiful.
Again, my guests tonight have been Alan Sukoenig, who's really responsible a lot for getting the legendary Hassan out there. You know, back the liner notes on the original recording that certainly educated me about him, and now this new release, Metaphysics, and Lewis Porter really pushing it to make sure it happened. Lewis and Alan, thanks for this interview, and tomorrow's the official release, so people can be able to get a hold of it very easily. How can they get the record?
It's all over the place. It's on Amazon. It's on the Omnivore Records website. And people are going to find it's very easy to get a hold of, and they're going to want to get a hold of it, too. It's available in CD and LP.